So what we're here to talk about today is the Master Builders Australia National Federal Election Campaign, and explain a bit about what we've done, why we've done it, and then Ben's going to talk specifically about the execution of the campaign in terms of the TV advertisements and the background to the development of those. So the national campaign is all about why the industry is important to economic recovery. We've said for a long period of time that a strong building industry means a stronger economy. And obviously in a post-COVID environment, as we move out of COVID, we know with the significant amount of debt that has been accumulated by the federal government in keeping our heads above water as a country during that COVID period, means that they desperately need economic growth over the next decade to get that debt down, and so the future generations are not burdened with growing debt. And building and construction is critical to that economic growth story. Why? Because independent research conducted by us and reinforced by the federal government soon thereafter is that for every dollar spent in our industry, $3 is returned back into economic activity. And it's why we were deemed, for the most part, an essential industry during COVID. I acknowledge the fact that particularly in Victoria, you weren't so fortunate as some other states, and the same with New South Wales. But nevertheless, in comparison to other industries, we by and large were able to operate predominantly because of that economic contribution back into the economy. And so the question we've got is really, what is our role as the master builders in ensuring that we have our voice heard? Now, of course, our voice is heard all the time throughout a parliamentary term on all the issues that impact the industry. But the National Board had made a decision about 2 elections ago, maybe actually 3, that it's actually important, and probably even more important, that we get our message heard during a federal election campaign, that we're not taken for granted, that politicians don't turn around post an election and saying, well, you weren't too worried about that while we were holding a campaign. So for us, the key issues have been really threefold. One is to be able to tell the electorate at large that we are critically important to the economy, and they should take into account the impacts on us when they're thinking about how they're going to cast their vote. The second thing is housing. We know housing is a critical issue throughout the entire country, and around the fact that the vast majority of Australians want to own their own home. But of course, there are barriers to that. It's around supply of titled land, around costs associated with land, including developer charges, including planning costs. It's also about whether or not we're providing enough community and social housing, and it's whether or not we're building enough housing for the right type of housing for the right type of people in the right type of place. And that, of course, is in an environment at the moment where we've got low migration. So what's going to happen when we've got increase in immigration as well? The second big issue that you'll see happening in the newspapers is at the moment the only major differential between the political parties is around industrial relations. And so with the ALP running a fairly small target policy approach, likewise the Feds are running a fairly small target policy approach as well. There is only one major differentiation at the moment from a building perspective, and that is in industrial relations. And of course, MBA continues to push very hard on the ALP not to abolish the ABCC. And our research would show that a huge number of our members and soft voters are very critical of that policy, because anything that hampers our capacity to meet that $3 return, people are worried about. So it's not just a matter of what will help us get to that $3 return, but actually making sure that things that hinder us are not going to be put in our way. And one issue is obviously industrial relations. So for us, it's always been around don't abolish the ABCC, don't abolish the construction watchdog. But equally, it's also about some of the issues out of the ALPIR policy. So, for example, their push towards employee-like work, which the way in which you read the policy at the moment would indicate that they want to cover independent contractors in awards and EBAs. And that's obviously a significant concern to us. We've been very strong on supporting the structure of independent contracting. And that's only just come out publicly as a consequence of our pushing and a couple of other employer groups pushing that in discussions with journalists. This is, I think, our eighth, I've lost count, Ben, already, eighth roadshow event that we've held. We've got another 4 weeks of doing this around the country, and it's been fantastic just talking to everyone and getting an understanding firsthand. Don't think the fact that anything we talk about this afternoon, it doesn't just stay with us. We actually put it on our list of things to do, but we also pass it on to the political parties as well, because we know if we're going to try and make a difference, sometimes you've got to get them at the right place at the right time, and if things are tight, it's amazing what a bit of a phone call will make to tweak a policy that might assist. And if they can make a public commitment, then we've got them, and we've got to then hold them to account in a post-election environment. So that's why we're so vocal in pushing issues that matter to builders and tradies. So I'm now going to get Ben to come up and talk about the ads.
This campaign is all about reinforcing to politicians and the community that the vital contribution our industry makes to the economy, but also to each and every community around Australia. So in the analysis that I mentioned, you'll see that in both Albury, which is in Farrer, and in Wodonga, which is in Indi, there are more than 6,000 people employed by our industry in each of those seats, in each of those communities. And then there are around there are actually around 2,500 small building businesses in both of those communities. You think how closely those communities are related, you know way better than me, obviously you live it every day. That's a huge contribution that our industry makes to the economy and to the community in the places where you live and work. So when we structured our campaign, our strategy was to test our policies and our principles and concepts with focus groups and soft voters and builders and tradies around the country, and we did that with 40 marginal seats across Australia. The overwhelming response was that our industry is hugely supported. People see both resi and commercial construction sites around their communities and civil, and they see that as a hugely positive, almost a talisman of positivity after 2 years of COVID. They see those sites as being crucial to our recovery economically, and all they want is economic recovery. What they want from the major parties and from the independents and from everybody is a plan. They want to know, what is the detailed plan? Now, we know that there are issues that are state issues and that we shouldn't conflate those, but we also know that the federal government can take some leadership on those, and Danita has been calling for that, most recently after we visited Nowra in New South Wales. The other issues that came out strongly in the focus groups were the support for small business. Strong support for small business, and that was one of the major things. Now, there's 98% of small businesses in our industry, and that's just goes to show how vital we are again. There's more small businesses in our industry than any other sector in the economy, and that again is testament to how important it is that the next government supports the recovery. The other point that Danita's been making is that whichever party wins and whichever leader wins, whether it's Anthony Albanese or Scott Morrison, one of them will be responsible for the economic recovery. That's why it's really important that we've been calling for both parties to have a plan for that. That's what that's what soft voters in our industry wants, and that's what we've been calling for. So the other point to make is that although the ABCC is fundamentally about commercial construction sites and government-funded projects, etc., tradies and builders and soft voters around the country see it as being important that our industry is not disrupted. And they don't make a distinction around resi sites or commercial sites. They just see potential for rogue unions like the CMFEU to disrupt the recovery, and they're opposed to that. And so that's really the strong conclusion that the research came out with. So now what I'll do is I'll show you the ads. The first ad is about, again, reinforcing the deeper, not only the economic contribution, but the deep community contribution that you make to your communities. And we call it the heart and soul. So I'll show that ad.
It's where we live.
It's where we work.
It's jobs.
For people like me.
All of us.
It's food on the table.
A roof over our heads.
For every dollar spent in the building and construction industry
is $3 in all our communities.
So vote for the party with the best plan for economic recovery that will back builders and tradies, because we're Australia's heart and soul.
Authorised by D. Warren Master Builders Australia Limited, Canberra.
So just to emphasise the fact that the commitment our members have to what we're doing in this campaign, most of the people in that advertisement are working for members of Master Builders Australia and Master Builders New South Wales and Master Builders Victoria and Tasmania who are doing this for free. So that allows us to do to produce the ads very cheaply, put all the emphasis on all the priority on placement, in other words, making sure the ads are seen, and it also again shows how authentic they are too, given that people are prepared to actually appear in those things, which are being, as we speak, screening nationally on TV and all over the place. As Nita said, Labor have been running a small target strategy. Our focus groups show that people are very much aware of that, and fortunately or unfortunately for Labor, the policies they do have out there are industrial relations policies, and that's why we're paying attention to them and why everybody else is too in the media right now.
Every dollar spent in the construction industry during the pandemic has meant $3 for the economic recovery. But we can't take this for granted. Construction union bullies want to put it all at risk. Tell Labor to not put the recovery at risk. Keep the construction watchdog. Authorised by D. Warren Master Builders Australia Limited, Canberra.
The final ad is about home ownership. Home ownership came out as being an incredibly important issue. People see it as being the way that the average person who doesn't have, stockbrokers and financial firms ringing them up and telling them to buy and sell, the latest shares, can actually develop their family's wealth and actually build their own wealth and security. And so home ownership is really, really important.
Home ownership should be within everyone's reach. It's a dream that's in our DNA. It builds wealth and security for now and the next generation. But making it happen, that's getting harder than ever. That's why you should vote for the party with the best plan to keep the dream of home ownership alive. Authorised by D. Warren Master Builders Australia Limited.
It's important to say that Danita has always been really, really clear that we're not doing these exercises as a sort of a branding exercise, even though it's great for the Master Builders brand. We've always been really careful to have a really direct call to action, and that's why we've been saying in all of those ads, vote for the party. Vote. Actually take action on May 21 to back our industry, back our members, and back your own communities and your economies. And that's a really important point that differentiates Master Builders campaigns.